Key and
Now
Peele.
be nice.
Do you mean Denise?
Jordan Peele. Key and Peele.
Boise State University. Torque!
Jordan Peele. Is he spittin' or just bullshittin'? Are his followers lambs, or is he actually just the man's? Though more important than all of that, what is Jordan Peeling? All these questions answered and more in this video about the year is 1979, and a baby by the name of Jordan Peele has been born. This baby would then go on to live 23 uneventful years of life. Yeah, just a normal life, nothing strange really. He went to school, went to a private college using a scholarship, made some friends. Yeah. Then, at the age of 23, after being in college for 2 years, he drops out in order to form a comedy duo. And the rest from there is history. Honestly, I was pretty astonished to find out that Jordan Peele is actually ancient. Being an internet kid, I only ever heard of him because of Key and Peele clips that would go viral online, and would make me ha ha. Which made me think, oh, must be recent. But no, dude's been in the show business since before I even existed. This goofy man's been all over the place. He's been a comedian, an actor, a writer, a voice actor, and even a college dropout. Did you know he was majoring in puppetry? Did you know a person could major in puppetry? Anyways, despite him being a famous person, if you asked me something he's been in, I really couldn't tell you. Again, most likely because I am an internet kid. Needless to say, SNL is a random set of 3 letters, and all these things he's done previously don't really mean all that much to me. Though in 2017, that would change. To say Get Out made waves is a bit of an understatement. When this film came out, it very quickly became the talk of every town, which is very well deserved. After all, the film is great, and towns don't often speak so profoundly. Get Out is a film that would get nominated for every award a film could get nominated for, and would even manage to win one of the most important awards a film could earn. The People Won't Shut Up About It award. It also grossed $250 million from a comparably tiny budget, which explains why suddenly after the movie came out, the Hollywood bigwigs suddenly had a interest in its topics. But this video is not about the resurgence of race horror and the terrifying reality of corporate Hollywood, it's about Get Out. This great movie I would recommend you watch if you haven't. All 7 of you. But why is that the case? Well, for that, we will be needing to take a closer look at the film itself. So, I'm not really a big fan on the whole review type of video. They usually come out kind of boring, but I'd be a liar if I didn't admit that they're really good for talking about something. So, let's just go with that. I'll try and make it a bit more fun than the usual. The basic plot synopsis for Get Out is a man named Chris is going up on a trip with his girlfriend Rose Armitage to meet with her parents, something that his really good friend Rod is extremely against. Though that's not to say Chris doesn't agree with him. In fact, it's pretty obvious that he does. His anxiety being so clear that his girlfriend Rose picks up on it instantly and confronts him on it. As it turns out, Chris is her first black boyfriend, and he fears what might happen if she doesn't let her parents know before going up there that, well, you know. But Rose assures him that they aren't racist and he shouldn't have to worry about anything, going so far as to say that they are so not racist that they would have voted for Obama a 3rd time if they could have. Now, obviously, Chris is still terribly anxious about this whole thing, but still goes through with it because he really does love Rose. A decision he'll unfortunately come to regret, because once they do arrive, his worst fears become realized. Though it's not because Rose was lying, it's because she was telling the truth. From here transpire the events of Get Out, and it's a pretty wild ride. It's got many themes and things to comment on, but personally, my favorite thing about the movie is how it's presented. The film is primarily composed of extreme Ultra 4K HD close-ups of people's faces, which really helps express the characters' emotions. Most importantly, it really helps express Chris's emotions, because coincidentally on the same weekend Rose was visiting, a very special get-together was happening at the Armitage residence. A get-together comprised of, well, you know, who repeatedly make Chris extremely uncomfortable through objectification. An emotion that comes over very clearly thanks to the constant close-ups. All the reactions, everything he does, it's all made super clear and aware to the audience. Which is funny, cause that's the same way that people at this get-together view Chris. All eyes are on him, including your own, because it turns out what's actually happening at the residence is actually much worse than just a bunch of people that would have voted for Obama a 3rd time if they could have. Now sadly this twist is half spoiled by the very first scene in the film, but I think it's still a really great plot twist. One of my favorite things about horror is its ability to comment on things that are taboo through the use of hyperbole and exaggeration, two qualities that come naturally with this genre. One of my favorite things about this movie is that it views one of these taboo subjects through a different lens than the usual. The villains in this movie don't start holding up crosses, wearing white hoods, and spouting racial slurs. In fact, the villains in this movie, to some, might not even seem like villains at all. Minus the whole body snatching thing, that's a bit unhinged really. Hell, some people might not even notice that they're being racist. And the reason for that is because this movie calls out a specific thing that never really gets brought up. So what is racism exactly? And I'm not talking the definition you might have given it, I'm talking the actual official definition. Well, according to Merriam-Webster, the definition of racism is a belief that a race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Now, I was gonna use the example, X people are always so Y, but I realized instead of using math to explain words, I should probably use words. And what words would not be better suited for this than the words of a great philosopher of my time. A philosopher that goes by the name of Raymond William Johnson, and the alias YFM, aka Your Favorite Martian. Now in Raymond's aptly titled hit song, The Stereotypes Song, he explains how comical and absurd he finds stereotypes, which is what has led him to create this musical composition wherein he goes over and states many stereotypes with varying degrees of offensiveness. I'll be quoting the song directly here to make the points I want to make very clear. Taken from lines 40 to 43 of the Stereotypes song, I quote, "Even Russian guys who drink vodka for breakfast, they're stereotypes, and if you believe them, then your brain is small like a Korean's penis." Masterful lyricism aside, here's a perfect example of all forms of racism. These lines state that the capacity to drink vodka for breakfast is something only to be assumed of the Russian people. It also states that the human trait of having a below average member is to be expected only of the Koreans. Moreover, due to how relativity works, it's easy to assume that, since Koreans are the ones with small penises, all other races have larger peni, thus making them superior, despite it being common knowledge that it's not how big it is, it's about how you use it. This line is also important because it shows a good way of questioning their racism is to speak in their terms. If you read between the lines, you can see that it clearly states, if you believe in stereotypes, then you have a small brain, something indicative of a below average intelligence that's actually been used in the past by many racial stereotypes, thus making a stereotypical observation of people who believe in stereotypes. The intensity of this pea-brain syndrome is then further emphasized by another stereotype that these people might believe in. Meaning the person must recognize a stereotype of people who believe in stereotypes having small brains, then choose to disregard it for the benefit of himself, which would then have a chain reaction, hopefully leading them to abandon all stereotypes they believe in. Furthermore, if they did no longer have a small brain, that would mean that their brain is big, which, naturally, as a matter of course, would lead them to come to understand that Koreans don't have small penises. Some people just have small penises, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, I'm not. Now I know it might seem ludicrous to bring up this song, after all it's something every single person on earth has heard. YFM Stereotype Song is the song that famously, as was said by the media coverage, solved racism, and society after its release has not seen better days. But jokes aside, now back to being serious, what would you say is the exact opposite definition of racism? What's it mean to not be racist? Well, it's pretty simple. To not be racist means to have a belief that race is not a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences do not produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Seems simple, right? Well, not quite. Because a person could make a very honest and simple mistake by overcorrecting. Somebody could want to be so not racist that they would become not racist. At the base of racism lies a very simple concept. The concept of dehumanization, the act of taking away human traits from a human and turning them into something borderlining a caricature. Willingly choosing to obscure the truth of the matter, the truth being that they are human and have all the good and bad traits that come with being one. In this film, the characters idealize the black man. These characters believe that being black is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities they have deemed beneficial. They believe being black is inherently superior to anything else because, you see, this coin has two sides. On this one, the black man is considered godlike, and on the other, the black man is considered demonic, both sides failing to recognize that the black man is nothing more or less than just your fellow man. The Armitage could steal other people to use for their experiments, but they choose to steal only black people, for the same reason that they would have voted for Obama a third term. Not because of anything Obama had done in their interest or any cold hard truth that would be deserving of such an honor, but because Obama was black. A set of lines that's always stuck out to me was a conversation that happens right before the big reveal, where a guy goes,
"Do you find that being African American has more advantage or disadvantage in the modern world?"
Chris then responding with,
Yeah, I don't know, man. Hey.
because you see, to these people, being black really does seem like a benefit in modern life. And I'd like to ask you, are they really wrong? I mean, just listen to me here for a second. All the people here at this party have led good lives. They've all gotten good education, they were all raised in good neighborhoods, and they've never had to worry about where the food on the table comes from. And these black people are just like them, except for some strange reason. Black people are just better at sports, they're better in bed, they are given more chances, and they're even given automatic respect nowadays because it's trendy to do so. Do you seriously intend to tell me that if those people were not black, those things would still be true? I'm right. Am I not? So says the wolf wearing his white hood, not fully grasping what it means to be the sheep he wears the skin of.
Get out.
Sorry, man.
Okay.
Get out!
Yo!
No!
Yo! Chill, man.
Get out!
Chill!
Get out! Chill! Chill, man! Chill! Get the fuck out of here!
Another line that's always stuck out to me from the film is this one. Because it's funny, which is great. Something I really like about this movie is the fact that a lot of it just sort of comes off like an inside joke. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. I hope I don't have to explain why Chris trying to walk up to a presumable homie and them going, "Why, hello there, my good fellow. How are you doing on this fine morning?" "Oh, I'm doing most splendid, you know, yard work and whatnot, get the old bones moving again." Well, I've got to get back to my work. Toodaloo. This movie almost borderlines on being a comedy sketch at times, which I think is really important. Comedy makes things easier to watch, you know? Or at least for me it does. Think of it like that thing you take with your medicine to make it taste better. I also think it's important because racism is low-key, high-key, pretty absurd. So absurd that it can be pretty funny in retrospect. Cause like, seriously? People actually believe this stuff? Though despite the constant comedy, the movie still keeps a really tense tone because of how much nuance is put into the humor. Seriously, it almost seems the guy that made this was a comedian at some point. I remember once I had gone on a family road trip a little up north for me, meaning the real south. And I remember while driving in traffic, there was this ill-tempered driver besides us, you know, cutting people off, beeping constantly, accelerating and decelerating more than necessary. The old man also had a mean case of resting bitch face. So you can only imagine how wide the smile that came over my face was when he eventually cut us off and plastered oh so gracefully on the back of his two-seater truck was the Confederate flag and a MAGA sticker. You can then also imagine how quickly the smile and chuckle disappeared once I realized, wait a second, that's a Confederate flag and a MAGA sticker. 'Cause like, seriously, people still believe this stuff. Now, luckily, I would not be seen as a hellspawn in these people's eyes, I'm just the guy in charge of mowing their lawns, but that didn't take away from the anxious feeling that comes from being in a place where you feel like you don't belong. The anxious feeling that comes from being the few of the majority. What I'm trying to say is that half of this movie is an uncut bruh moment and that's amazing. And luckily the reward for surviving all of that is pretty worth it. Because Chris does manage to triumph over these quite frankly strange people in the end. But don't think the triumph came out of nowhere. Everything he does here is foreshadowed throughout the movie. Which is extremely important because if the whole time the movie is trying to say that assuming other races are superior to others is very bad, and then Chris starts doing some legitimate superhero shit because he just can, would be pretty tone deaf. Luckily though, that isn't the case. Thanks to Chris's tendency to scratch whatever he's touching when he's anxious, he manages to escape getting knocked out unconscious. Thanks to having a history in judo, he's able to beat the lights out of everybody. Thanks to knowing how the hypnotism works, he's able to break the teacup before it can be used to hypnotize him again. And thanks to...
until it is done.
Well, honestly, I think he's just power tripping here, but the scene goes hard so I don't care. Chris's rampage is pretty much unstoppable. He knows exactly what he has to do. Which includes what he must do for himself. Right before escaping, Chris runs over Rose's grandmother, who is currently inhabiting the body of one of Rose's exes. But instead of just continuing and leaving her there to die, he decides to get out and go save her. Partly because he knows that there's still a piece of the original girl left inside of her, but mostly because Chris is still suffering from terrible trauma relating to an incident that happened when he was younger. You see, one day Chris was at home watching TV and had noticed while waiting for his mom to return from work that she was taking a long time. A worryingly long time. But instead of calling 911 to maybe send out a search, he just stayed still watching TV. completely frozen in fear of what might have possibly happened to his mother, hoping that by ignoring the situation, it wouldn't become reality. On that day, Chris's mother would never return, and it was due to being involved in a fatal hit-and-run accident where the perpetrator had left her on the road to die. The tragic part of the tale being that she had actually survived the initial impact, leaving her to instead slowly succumb to her injuries on the side of that road. Of course, there's no way Chris could have known this would happen. After all, he was just a kid and a panicked one at that. But in his mind, he is fully responsible for the terrible fate of his mother, because there was a small chance where she could have been saved if he wasn't paralyzed by fear all those years ago. That's when he notices the similar scenario he's put himself in, he decides to run back and save her, if only to make amends for the time he didn't.
Grandma.
This is probably the most poignant part of the movie, and it's probably what stuck with people the most. The movie's ending. After freeing this man from the control of Rose's grandfather, the man fatally injures Rose and then decides to take his own life.
Not today!
Chris, still having some energy left in him after what happened, notices that Rose is still around, and he decides it's best to finish her off himself. After executing her, the cops show up, then bam, he ends up in prison. Chris knows he did the right thing. It's just a shame that the possibility of what he did is something that the courts would never even play at, which is why Chris decided he'll just be a martyr and rot away in prison, understanding he has no chance of winning in the enemy team's home court. But what if I told you there could have been another ending? In this ending to the movie, a similar scenario happens, except Chris can't bring himself to kill Rose, instead choosing to leave her to bleed out. And when the cops arrive, it's not actually the cops, but instead his friend, who's been trying to reach him the entire film. Now in both endings, Chris completes his character arc. In both of them, he overcomes his trauma by having full control over the choice of what happens to the people left in a similar situation to his mother. And in both endings, he is pretty much a martyr that chooses to keep whatever happened in that place to himself. The only real difference between the two is that one seems a lot more real than the other, which makes it strange that Peele would go back and reshoot the ending. Yeah, surprise to absolutely none of you. The first ending I spoke about isn't actually the one used in the movie. It's the original one, yes, but it's not the one that ended up being used. And while I could sit up here in this soapbox and try and explain why, that won't be necessary, because Peele's already spoken on this himself. When he first wrote the script, it was during Obama's term, which took place during what he calls a post-racial lie. I.e., lol, there's a black man in the White House, clearly racism is no longer an issue. Which was a lie that very quickly got handled after, making it so this original ending wasn't necessary anymore. The first ending is a gut punch. It's a WTF moment. It's meant to be a statement. The issue being the statement is no longer necessary. What the cops do at the end of the movie isn't a WTF moment. The first ending would have been a gut punch to someone who's already been down, which is why he remade it to better suit the times, and thank God he did. The first ending felt terrible, whereas the new one still feels pretty rough, but at least it's more hopeful. I think a YouTube comment on the video that contains the alternate ending puts it better than I ever could. I really expected this ending. Everyone in the theater gasped then cheered when we saw who came out the car. So glad Jordan went with a happy ending. We needed it. So ends Get Out, a movie that would cement Peele as a new up-and-coming director. But that's not to say the movie was a masterpiece. In fact, far from it. The movie's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not proof that Peele is the new coming of Christ here to shepherd everyone into a new woke era. It's pretty much just a fun watch that's worth your time. If I were to point out one thing that bugged me a bit about the movie, it's that it was very hand-holdy and a little on the nose in some points. This issue I'm pointing out is also extremely visible in the cutscenes from the movie, which, thank God they got removed because, the nose has been compromised. Also, this is just blatantly like a Five Nights at Freddy's level jump scare. Thank God it got cut. But honestly, those are just minor nitpicks, not really deal breakers or anything, which sums up how I feel about this movie. This movie's great. Nothing more, nothing less. A movie with some slight issues that don't keep it from being a good time. Though that's not to say Everybody felt the same way. Something I had noticed while researching for this movie were many low-starred reviews with many great points I forgot to mention. Almost all extremely low reviews of this movie shared the common criticism that this is blatant racism and should be shunned for being so anti-white, which I understand completely. Many of the people that watch this movie are sick and tired of the white people always being villains nowadays, and almost no heroes being white anymore. I mean, come on, it's so unfair to have the color of your skin be turned into your entire character, to become tokenized. These offensive stereotypes of white Get Out might not be the best movie of all time, but honestly that's not surprising since it was never trying to be. From the very beginning, Get Out was only ever meant to be a commentary on us. Nothing more, nothing less. Overrated, overhyped, predictable, amateurish, yeah, sure, but all those qualities don't make the movie itself, and more importantly, people's reactions to it, any less intriguing.